Hi everyone, it's Julianne here and welcome back to my channel. I'm back today with another card that's a part of my 2020 Christmas card making series. And today I'm going to be using a stamp set from Hedgehog Hollow. And this stamp set was a part of their November 2020 box. And I'm going to be using that stamp in order to create the Slimline Nativity scene. The stamp set that I'm going to be using today is the Nativity 6x8 stamp set, which features a bunch of different images that you can combine all together on a card in order to create a beautiful nativity scene. This stamp set also features some really great sentiments as well. But for my card today, I'm just going to be stamping out the manger with baby Jesus as well as the barn image. And I'm going to be stamping both of those images onto a sheet of Express It blending cardstock using some Memento Tuxedo black ink, since I do plan on doing some Copic coloring. Now, once I have both of those images all stamped out, I'm then going to start working on my Copic coloring. And I am going to be using a lot of brown shades for my coloring today, since my scene is really focusing on that barn and the manger. So I will make sure to have all of those marker caps off to the side of the screen so you can follow along as I'm coloring. Now that I have both of my images all colored in, I'm going to start working on fussy cutting them both out since this stamp doesn't have a coordinating die set. Now I started fussy cutting out the barn that you see here, leaving that white border that you would get if I had used a die cut. But I quickly decided that I didn't really want that white border since I knew I was going to be having an ink blended background, and I really wanted that image to kind of blend in with the background since I knew I was going to be coloring in those open areas. So I quickly went back in and around that image using those same scissors, but this time I cut directly on the stamped line. Once I have it all cut out, I'll then come in with a Memento Tuxedo black marker, and I'm just going to use that marker to go around the edges. Next, I'm going to start working on my background, and like I mentioned earlier, I did do some ink blending for this, and I'm going to be using my Distress inks. Since I was creating a night sky, I used the colors Blueprint Sketch, Chip Sapphire, and finally Black Soot. I'll also be using some Picket Fence, and that'll be for the rays that will resemble the Star of Bethlehem, shining down on baby Jesus in his manger. I will also be using some gathered twigs, and that's going to be for the ground/dirt area that will be underneath the barn. Now I'm going to start out using a piece of masking paper, And I'm just going to be adding that down to the bottom of my Slimline panel. So that way it's masked off so I don't get any of that blue ink on that area. And then I'm going to start working on ink blending my night sky. And I'm going to start out with Blueprint Sketch down at the bottom. And then I'm going to be coming in with that chipped sapphire in the center towards the top area. And then finally I'll be coming in with my darkest color of that black soot. And I'll just be adding that to the top of the panel. Now once I've added that dark color, I'm then going to go back in with my chipped sapphire and that Blueprint Sketch again to get a seamless blend between all three of those colors. So once I was done with all of my ink blending for the sky portion of my background, I'm going to be using the other half of that masking paper that I cut from earlier, and I'm going to mask off my sky, and then I'm going to ink blend the bottom area with the gathered twigs. Once I'm done with that, I'm then going to put my background off to the side to dry, and I actually walked away and left my room. Once I came back, I then started working on adding in the effect of the stars shining down, and for that I'm going to be using a raised stencil, and I'm going to be positioning that on top of my background panel. To make sure that the stencil doesn't move as I'm ink blending, I am going to add a little bit of pixie spray to the back of it before placing it down onto my panel. Now for the raise, I'm going to be using Picket Fence, and I'm going to be using a blender brush just like before to add that color onto the stencil. Now while ink blending, I am going to be focusing a lot of that color towards the top, and then I'm going to be fading out towards the bottom. Now I definitely thought my background was dry when I started this, but it definitely was not. So you are going to see that I am carrying some of that blue ink onto my Picket Fence ink pad. But don't worry, once I'm completely done with all of my ink blending, I can wipe that away and the ink pad is still good to use. So I'm just going to continue adding in all of that Picket Fence, and once I'm happy, I'm going to peel back that stencil to reveal that beautiful effect. I just love how this looks and exactly what I was going for. This is also a great way to add some light rays if you're creating an underwater scene. Now while my background dries, I'm going to be coloring in those open areas that I mentioned in earlier on the barn, kind of like the window areas, but back then there were no windows, so just open areas, I'm going to say. And I'm going to be coloring in those areas to match my background the best that I can. Now I originally started out with B26 and B29. I'm going to be adding that B29 as my shadow areas, and then I'm going to color in the rest of those areas with the B26. Now I am quickly going to realize that that B26 is a little too bright for my background, so I'm going to just go back over each one of those areas with the B29, and that's going to really darken those areas, and I think that that just matches my background much better. Next, I'm going to start working on my sentiment for my card, and for that, I'm going to be placing my background panel back inside of my MISTI, and I am going to be stamping one of the sentiments that's included in the Nativity stamp set. Now, the sentiment that I decided to go with for my card is, "The For unto us a child is born." I thought it was perfect for my card, and I'm going to be positioning that stamp towards the top of my panel, and I'm going to be stamping it down using some VersaMark ink. And once I have that all stamped out, I'm then going to add some gold embossing powder to that, and I'll heat set that using my heat tool. So now to give my card that little bit of added dimension, I'm going to be popping up my background onto my card base using some foam. Now I'm using a foam sheet that I get from Michaels, and I'm just going to be adding some liquid adhesive to one side of that foam sheet, and then I'll adhere that down to my background, and then I'll add some additional adhesive to the other side and adhere that down to my card base. Now, unlike normal foam adhesive, this does allow you a little bit of time to move things around and get them lined up all perfectly, which is definitely what I need because I definitely struggle with getting things lined up the first time. I think if I were to change my crafty name, it might be Slightly Crooked, because every time I'm adhering anything with foam, it is slightly crooked. But anyways, so it also allows you a little bit of extra time for it to dry. So when I'm waiting for this to dry, I just like to put something heavy on it, like my MISTI, until it's completely dry. So once that's all dry, I'm then going to be adhering my barn down to my card as well as that manger. And I'm going to be adding some foam adhesive, the regular foam adhesive, to the back of that barn. And I'll adhere that into the center of my panel. And once that's all adhered, I'll then add some more of that liquid adhesive behind the manger, and then I'm just going to be adhering that down to my card as well. Finally, to finish off this card, I'm going to be adhering a few gold confetti mix sequins throughout my background to match that gold embossed sentiment. And once I get those last couple all adhered, that's going to complete my Slimline Nativity Scene card. I really love how this card came out, and I really like that background. And I really hope that you like this card as well. If you do, please give it a thumbs up, as well as subscribe for even more card making ideas. If you're interested in any of the supplies I used, they will all be listed and linked down below in the description box. And as always, I hope you have a wonderful day. I'll see you next time, and happy crafting!